right. Well, good to see everybody today. Welcome those who are tuning in online as well. And we're in a series called Shalom. And Shalom is the Hebrew word for peace or well-being. And this series will take us through the end of February. And then we'll be starting a new series called, it's kind of a Lenten series called Rethink, a Journey to the Cross. And Easter's just around the corner this year. It's the last Sunday in March, so it comes a little early this year. So, we're already gearing up for that. And today, our topic is financial health. So this is the 6th week of a 7-week series. And for those of you who are guests, we started this out about 5 weeks ago, and we've got small groups that are going through this series called Shalom, and we've been looking at financial health, emotional health, relational health, mental health, all kinds of health issues, spiritual health. And so today we're looking at financial health, and but I wanted to share just a couple of things. It's been a kind of a crazy week this week. I don't know if any of you have felt what I have felt, but last Wednesday, of course, last Sunday, we were decked out in red here last Sunday for the Chiefs game. And then, I must confess that I've been a Chiefs fan since I was a little kid, okay? So I get wound up. And I can't sit still when I'm watching a Chiefs game. I'm up out of my chair. I'm yelling at the TV. I'm yelling at the refs. I'm yelling at our guys if they drop a ball, which happened more frequently this year than I liked. And then, all of that stuff. And so I got so frustrated with the Super Bowl last Sunday night, I just turned it off. And I was recording it. And, about the time that the game should have been over, no fireworks went off in my neighborhood. So I'm thinking, dang, we lost, And then like 30 minutes way after the game should have been over, all of a sudden the fireworks go off. I went, oh my gosh, we won in overtime. There's no way it could have been. So then I go back and rewatch the game, of course, or watch what I missed. And what an amazing game. I have to tell you, I'm a Chiefs fan, but if I would have had a lot of money to bet, I probably wouldn't have betted for the Chiefs against the Bills. Probably wouldn't have betted for the Chiefs against Baltimore. I'm not sure I would have betted for the Chiefs against the San Francisco 49ers, even though I was cheering for them all the way, right? So what an incredible season. Who would have thought with Mahomes and company that we'd be winning games with a defense, But then we have this incredible day, Wednesday, which was the first day of Lent, Ash Wednesday, right? And I didn't grow up in a traditional liturgical church tradition. So last Wednesday night was my first ever Ash Wednesday service to conduct. And it just so happened that it landed on a Chiefs Super Bowl day and Valentine's Day, right? And so, I don't know, estimated 800,000 people show up downtown for the Chiefs parade. And it was an amazing, proud moment for Kansas City. And then all of a sudden, everything went haywire, right? And so the woman who was killed is actually, as I understand it, a friend of a very close relative of mine. So my nephew's mother-in-law was good friends with Miss Lopez, who was killed in that shooting. One of my other friends had a nephew who was shot in the buttocks during that shooting. I had friends at Children's Mercy Hospital who were working on people, and we had 3 in critical condition. The facts are still being collected, but a couple of young juveniles are being held, and evidently they didn't hit each other, but hit a bunch of other innocent bystanders, right? It's just crazy, the gun violence in America and the grief of that, and then to have the whole world's attention on Kansas City in such a proud moment, and then all of a sudden, all the national news for the next 24 hours, 48 hours is just focused on that. And then I come up here and we do an Ash Wednesday service where, you put the ashes on the forehead, and then the thing that you say, it's a remembrance of our mortality in some ways. And you say, remember that you are dust, and to dust you will return. And here I am saying those words, on this day when we're all reeling from the violence that went on. I had so many friends who had kids down there, and a lot of the kids that were shot were young, between 8 and 15. Just crazy, crazy stuff. And so, and then I had 2 other deaths this past week that were closely related to me. One of the gals that led a yoga meditation class with me here, Natalie Lloyd, her father-in-law passed away last week. I had another situation yesterday where a young lady, or a young woman, let's say, I say 42 is young to me. Is that young for y'all? All right. Anyway. All right. But no, she went to my former church, and her daughter's now 25, but man, she went through just horrible stuff the last few years and wound up on the streets and heavily addicted. Her daughter found her yesterday, got her to my home. Her and her daughter got an interview done, got her placed in a detox center, and now, kind of lining up everything for her from the detox forward. So, man, it's been a heavy week. So I wake up, Sunday morning, I'm like, man. I feel all of that kind of going on. And I was in touch with doctors literally all day yesterday for hours, and just trying to get this gal situated. And so crazy stuff. But so then to come and talk about financial health. And I'm like, not feeling it really. But I do want to mention a couple of things, and then I'm going to lock in on what I feel like we can all learn from. First of all, financial health is an important part of our life. And I honestly had lived a fairly well-balanced, financially health-filled life most of my life. I was very disciplined with my finances. And then, as many of you know, I went through a major meltdown a few years ago. And I lost, like everything, house, career, finances, all that kind of stuff. So then rebuilding has been really an obstacle, and I'm not really ready to dive into all of that. That's still an ongoing thing. But, some of the ingredients that go into financial health, I just want to mention real quickly. First of all, you got to stay out of debt or get out of debt. One of the two, credit card debt and debt for things that depreciate in value is, not a great way to invest our money, right? Just paying for credit card interest and all that kind of stuff. So if you're in debt, especially depreciating asset debt, get out of it. Now, if you're paying down a home mortgage, that's something I encourage people to get a mortgage instead of a rent, right? But that's an issue. Budget. You got to live within your means. You got to get a budget together. A lot of us don't like budgets, but living on a budget is an important thing. Saving. I like to talk about like the 10-10-80 plan, where you give 10%, you save 10%, you live on the rest of it, the 80%. And it's just some simple ideas. But the thing I wanted to focus on today is the giving portion of financial health. And I think it's something that we sometimes forget how important it is to give, and how we serve a God who's a generous God. God so loved the world that God gave. There's this generous flow of God. I like to talk about, I did a series last November, Generosity on Tap. As God creates and co-creates and partners with creation to move creation forward at all times, this loving God who is constantly creating and co-creating with all of creation is a generous God. And we want to get into that flow of generosity as we walk with God, as we serve God, as we love God, as we love others, as we love ourselves, and as, yes, we even love our enemies, right? And so my thing I think about is like, I want to live to give. A selfish, Fred-focused life isn't really, I think, worth living. I think I need to do self-care, self-compassion, take care of myself, and that's very important. And loving yourself is very important when it comes to loving God, loving others, and even loving our enemies. But I really do think that we flow with the heart of God when we flow in generosity and love. And so living to give, I think, is our greatest thing. And, you know, I like to say, you know, you never see a big U-Haul following a hearse. You know, I've done a lot of funerals over the years. And while we credit hoard and save like we can take it with us, and then, you know, the end comes, that death comes, and then all of a sudden, bam, you leave it all behind, right? And, you know, if you've got lots of resources, then a lot of people end up setting up trusts and foundations. I have a couple of friends that I know well who were trust fund kids, and parents set them up with, you know, millions. They would never have to work a day in their life. But, you know, but then I know people who live paycheck to paycheck and are worried every month about paying bills. And that is stressful. To live where finances aren't sure and secure is really tough. And honestly, a lot of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. A lot of people around the world don't even have money, don't even know where food and clothing the next day is coming from, right? And so if we think about global wealth, really most of the wealth is controlled by about 1% of the population in the world. And then most of us, if you drive here, live in the top percentage of world wealth if you just drove a car here and came to this service. And if you compare it to world poverty, most people live in poverty and aren't sure. I've been in some of the poorest places in the world, and they don't even have money, no running water, no electricity. And yet, what I observed is that they have joy. And so it's such an irony, right? Like you're going, you don't know how everything is going to work out. You don't have money. You don't have a bank account. You don't have this. But you have joy. And you're like, wow, what a blessing to learn to live life in this moment with gratitude and joy. And what you learn is that the way that people survive who are in poverty, do you know the most generous zip code in Kansas City is the poorest zip code? And they do analysis on your tax returns and all that kind of stuff. The people that give the biggest percentage of their income are the people who live in the poorest zip codes in Kansas City. And you go, well, how does that work? Well, it's because they constantly help each other. They're connected with family and friends, and when they go through something, the whole family moves to help that person out. That's the only way they make it. And then when that person's doing well, then they'll help other people out. And so there's this flow of generosity, even within poverty, that helps people exist. So I think one of the challenges we have is to not be so self-focused and live to give. Live to give. And so I want to read a passage from the Sermon on the Mount, from Luke's Gospel, chapter 6, verse 37, 38. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn others, and it will all come back. Against you. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven. Give, and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over, pouring into your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount you get back. So Jesus many times will highlight this principle of kind of like what you put out comes back. And in the big world of world religions, what would we call this principle? Like some people would call it karma, right? Other people would call it, you reap what you sow, like in Galatians, the book of Galatians. And then Jesus is here talking about this same kind of, what you put out comes back. So forgiveness, you put out forgiveness. It's nice to receive. How many of you like to receive forgiveness, right? So, but how many of you like to put it out when somebody's hurt you really badly? It's challenging, right? And so you think about how this flow of generosity works, and there's sort of this general principle of if we live to give, it comes back, but we never know. It's not a stingy way. You don't put one seed in the ground and then check it every day to see if it's growing, right? You put thousands of seeds out. You don't worry about which ones are growing and which ones are not. And then some of them grow and some of them come back and some of them multiply, and you never know where it's coming from, but you just put out and it comes back. Now, sometimes karma doesn't work so great, right? Sometimes we get stuff we don't deserve, and it can be really crummy, right? And then sometimes we get stuff we don't deserve in a good way, and we call that grace, and we love that, right? So, man, oh, wow, we got grace today. I didn't even deserve that, and it landed in my lap. And so we love grace. But this generosity, I think, is just the way we need to live. And so one of the things I did years ago when the love languages came out, remember Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages? It's almost become ubiquitous. It came out in 1992, and it was really written for relationships, like for marriages or friendships. But when I got a hold of that, 5 love languages, I started thinking about how some of those love languages even tie into our learning styles. Some of us are audible learners. Some of us are kinetic learners. Some of us need to learn in discussions with other people, talking with other people. A lot of different learning styles. And then there's these styles that speak to us in terms of our love language. What happens many times is we're trying to love people, show generosity to people through how we like to be loved. And sometimes we're not aware of how other people might receive love in a different way than we receive it, right? So that's kind of what this happened out. So you read the 5 love languages, and you'll think, oh, well, this is my love language, this is my love language. And then if you think about it, you tend to try to love other people through your own love language, but it might not be their primary love language, and we might kind of miss the mark with them. So what I like to think about is, we have 8 billion people on this planet. 8 billion. Wow, that's a lot of folks, right? And then here we are occupying some space here in Kansas City, breathing air in this amazing universe that we live in. I was just reading some statistics on how many stars are in our galaxy. It's like crazy billions, right? And then how many galaxies there are. And you're just like, wow. And here we are right now, taking up space together. And we're going to leave this place, and we're going to bump into people who are friends, who are family, people that we work with, people that we bump into in the store, in the grocery store, or in the restaurant. We bump into people all the time. And I just think, wow, as I have this space on this planet during my lifetime, I'm going to bump into thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And without putting a burden on my soul to feel like I need to change anybody or fix anybody or anything like that, the one thing that I can do is just be kind, be generous, be thoughtful, be nice. And it's not that difficult. And by the way, I've lived most of my life on the giving end of things, like caregiver, pastor, friend, all of that kind of stuff. When I went through my meltdown, man, I was judged harshly by some people, and I know how that feels. And then I was loved well by some people, and I was shown kindness by some people. And when you're falling apart and people show you kindness, oh my goodness, it's like a drink of fresh water. And then even when I was in my meltdown mode, I realized that even as dark as things got for me, I could still show up in ways that could be a blessing to other people. I could still live to give. Even though I didn't have any money anymore, even though I didn't have this and that, I still had life, breath, I still had words, I still had time. And so I think if you think about these 5 love languages and think about the people that you will encounter just this week, and we have these little prayer cards here. So I like to think about who are 10 people in your life that you just want to pray for and be a blessing to. And then you can use these 5 love languages to think about that. The first one, quality time. Quality time. I think with all the information overload that we have with social media and everything that's going on in our world today, how nice is it to spend time with somebody who genuinely puts their phone aside, isn't looking at their text messages or their social media, but like actually just gets maybe face-to-face. Could be on a Zoom, right? We did a lot of that, but face-to-face, and then just spends some quality time with you. And you can do that with other people. I want you to think right now, who are some people in your life right now that you're relating to that maybe the Spirit would just prompt you right now to think, I need to spend some quality time with that person. And it might even be somebody you've never spent quality time with. Out in the foyer, we've got some of these 10 people to pray for, and on the back of it, we just walk you through how to be a good listener and how to ask good questions. One of the greatest ways you can show love is ask good questions and be present and be a good listener. That's generosity. That's generosity on tap. And that's one of the greatest ways that you can love somebody. I do a podcast. I interview somebody every week. Musicians, authors, mental health leaders, faith leaders, all different kinds of people. And what I do is I just ask questions and listen and ask questions and listen. And it's a beautiful way to get to know people. It's a beautiful way to love people. It's a beautiful way to be generous to people. And people feel loved and valued when they're heard and listened to. This is something that all of us can do. We can meet somebody over a cup of coffee. It doesn't cost a lot. Think about physical touch. How many of you grew up in families where physical touch was one of the love languages? I'm like hugs. Hugs, okay. And then how many of you are like, grew up in a no-hug family? And all right. So it's interesting. In the Bible, it says, greet one another with a holy kiss. All right. Did anybody do that this morning when you walked into church? Yeah, I haven't kissed anybody yet today, all right? Well, it's interesting. Like, I've been going to Ethiopia for over 20 years doing ministry there, and they do 3 kisses. It's like boom, boom, boom. Guys do that, and gals do that. I had to get the timing right because you don't want to start on the wrong side, but it's tricky. But they still greet one another with a holy kiss. It's and other cultures actually do that. Men will kiss each other on the cheek in Middle Eastern cultures, and it's very interesting. So, but around here, I do handshakes, all right? But I grew up in a hug family. And so if you want a hug, just hug me, and I'll hug you right back, all right? But otherwise, I'm going to handshake you because I know some of you get a little queasy when people start hugging, right? So we got to be mindful of that. But I would like to change it, like greet one another with a holy handshake, at least. And then if you take a little step further, you could like greet one another with a holy hug. And then I kind of steer clear of the kisses, all right? So that's just me. But anyway, physical touch. Do you realize how many people in the world today are isolated and alone? The number of people who can't say they have one close friend that they can depend on has escalated over the last 20 to 30 years in America. And there's people who never get a kind, loving touch in their life. And some people, that's their main love language, just a hug, just showing kindness through physical touch. Acts of service is the third one. And think about this. We can show kindness to people in all kinds of ways. There's thousands of ways to serve people. I like to think of when we do outreach here from Living Water Christian Church, I like to think of us just going out showing God's love in practical ways. So we have people that are helping out with the food pantries and the backpacks that we're partnered with Hillside Christian Church. We have a D&D group here that meets. It's an outreach group. It's one of the largest groups in the city for D&D. Isn't that right? You looked. I think it is. Somebody told me that. Abby leads that group. But they'd been meeting here, and all of a sudden we needed some stuff like redone, and the group just volunteered. They're not even members here at the church. And then they stained our porch out here and did a whole bunch of work. But there's just a flow of service that we want to do. Think about Jesus' first miracle. You remember what it was? Water into wine. Water into wine. That was Jesus' first miracle. Water into wine. When I grew up Baptist, they told us he turned water into grape juice. But if you read the story, people kind of started getting a little tipsy, and then Jesus brought out the good wine later, remember? It's hard to get tipsy on grape juice, if you drink too much. Anyway, I'm just playing with you. I definitely think it had alcoholic content, but you think about it. They ran out of wine, and that's an embarrassing thing to happen, so Jesus just steps in, and the first miracle was, what's the significance other than he was just being kind to the wedding party? And he does something kind. He shows love in a practical way. So it doesn't have to be huge and fancy. It can just be sometimes just small and friendly acts of service. And then giving gifts. So this is where, money comes in for sure, but thoughtful gifts sometimes mean way more than money, right? Like if you know somebody and then I can give them that and it's going to mean this to them. That's a huge blessing. So homemade gifts are huge blessings. Sometimes these things don't have to be, my mother knits like pots for, help me out, pot holders for people and scarves for people. And it's just a thing done with love, but I can't tell you how many hundreds of people through the years have gotten a scarf or a pot holder from my mom. And they hang on to it. Why? Because she made it, number one, and she gave it with love, number two. And so there's just lots of ways. And then the last, words of affirmation. It doesn't cost you a thing to smile at somebody. Do you know you know how you get busy and you kind of in your own head and you get a little frowny and grumpy, and surely none of you get that way here, but you all look great and smiley and happy here today. But we can get caught up in our own stuff. But just going to a grocery store, standing in a line with somebody and just smiling. Hey, you just I call it break the silence barrier. Because if you sit down on an airplane next to somebody and you don't say a word the whole trip, and you're so close you can't even not touch them, because the seats are so tight and small. I just like to break the silence barrier and say, hey, how's it going today? Just a smile and a kind greeting. And then you never know where that simple act of kindness can go. And then if I'm listening to somebody and ask enough questions, then I always try to think of something like, what's one thing that I can give them a compliment on based on just this short interaction right now, okay? And then I just love to just share an encouraging word with somebody and just try to lift a thing. It doesn't hardly cost you any time. It's just a simple, kind word. And that kindness can make a difference in somebody's life. We never know the impact. I think when Jesus quoted from Luke 6, this passage about given it shall be given to you, he was thinking of Ecclesiastes 11:1, which is that famous passage about keep on casting your bread upon the water, and soon it's going to come back home on every shore. It's like a ripple effect. One person that you touch with kindness, you never know where that kindness goes, how it ripples out, how it touches other people, and then ultimately how it makes its way back to to us. So I'm like thinking, hey, there's a lot of ways to live a life here on this planet. But if we get in step with the love of God, the generous nature and heart of God, and we live to give, and we just constantly think of all the beautiful ways that we can encourage people through love, through prayers, through support, through kindness, through quality time, physical touch, acts of service, gifts, and words of affirmation, we'll create a culture of kindness, and that's contagious. That's what we want to build here at Living Water, and that's what we want to live as we walk out of this place. So Sam, I'm going to ask you to come on up, but she's going to lead us in a song of reflection, and then we'll close with communion. But God, come and do a work in our hearts today. I pray that you would stoke just with these ideas of the 5 love languages and how we can walk this out with love and kindness all around, Lord. We want to invade Kansas City with love and kindness, with all the violence, with all the heartache, with all the death, with all the difficulties that we've faced even this past week, God. We want to counteract that spirit of death, if you will, with a spirit of generosity and kindness and love that's rooted in the very heart, love, creativity, and generosity of God, yourself. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.